The House chamber was filled with activity as Representative Jasmine Crockett approached the podium. The morning debate on education funding had been tense, with clear divisions along party lines. C-SPAN cameras scanned the room, showing lawmakers either focused on the proceedings or distracted by their devices. "Mr. Speaker," Crockett began in a calm, steady tone, "I rise today to address the serious funding shortages facing public schools in underserved communities across America." She described how, in her Texas district, schools were dealing with crumbling buildings, outdated textbooks, and limited resources for special education programs. After glancing at her notes, she continued, "The bill before us today would cut federal education funding by 12% compared to last year, disproportionately affecting the most vulnerable students." A voice interrupted from across the chamber. "Will the gentlewoman yield for a question?" The camera shifted to Representative Matt Gaetz, standing with a smirk at his microphone. Without waiting for permission, he said, "I'm wondering if the gentlewoman from Texas has actually read the bill she's criticizing, or if she's just repeating Democratic talking points without understanding the math." A low murmur spread through the room. The speaker pro tempore looked toward Crockett. "Does the gentlewoman yield?" Crockett paused, composed and steady. "I yield for a question, not a speech," she replied. Her calm tone contrasted sharply with Gaetz's mocking expression. "My question is simple," Gaetz said, his voice thick with sarcasm. "If the gentlewoman is so worried about education, perhaps she can educate us on which page of this bill contains the so-called cuts she mentioned. Or is she just reading what her staff wrote for her?" The chamber grew silent. Interruptions were common during debates, but the personal nature of Gaetz's remark broke an unwritten rule of decorum. All eyes turned to Crockett. What happened next would dominate headlines for weeks and reshape Gaetz's career in Congress. Before we continue with the exchange that changed the tone of Congress, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss major political moments the mainstream media often overlooks. Representatives. Jasmine Crockett and Matt Gaetz represented two very different styles of congressional service and communication. Gaetz, first elected in 2016 to represent Florida's 1st District, had built his reputation on provocative statements and unwavering loyalty to former President Trump. Known for his combative nature, he became a frequent guest on cable news and a master of social media engagement. As one congressional analyst noted, Gaetz treats Congress like a stage. He prioritizes viral moments and media attention over actual legislative results. Despite multiple terms in office, Gaetz had few legislative accomplishments. Records showed he sponsored more than 40 bills, yet only one, a measure renaming a post office, was ever signed into law. His influence came largely from his ability to dominate news cycles through bold, often confrontational rhetoric. His personal conduct also faced scrutiny. Gaetz was the subject of several ethics investigations, including allegations of misconduct, drug use, and misuse of campaign funds, claims he consistently denied. Though never charged, the controversies made him a divisive figure even within his own party. In contrast, Jasmine Crockett approached public service with discipline and preparation. A former civil rights attorney, she joined Congress after serving in the Texas state legislature. Her legal background shaped her methodical, evidence-based style of debate. "She treats the House floor like a courtroom," a colleague observed. "She comes armed with facts, anticipates counter-arguments, and builds her case logically rather than theatrically." This difference in approach led to growing tension between the two lawmakers. Gaetz, accustomed to controlling debates with interruptions, frequently targeted Crockett, perhaps recognizing that her factual precision undermined his performance-driven strategy. The session in question focused on H.R. 4762, the Educational Opportunity and Excellence Act, a Republican-sponsored bill aimed at restructuring federal education funding. Republicans described it as a way to streamline inefficiency, while Democrats argued it would result in devastating cuts to essential programs. As the debate continued, both parties offered predictable arguments. Republicans emphasized local control and reducing bureaucracy. Democrats pointed to programs and communities that would lose funding. Crockett's speech, however, stood out. Instead of repeating talking points, she had analyzed all 341 pages of the bill, identifying specific sections that would impact districts nationwide. including Republican areas. Her staff prepared detailed data showing exactly how much funding schools in each congressional district would lose, including Gaetz's own district in Florida. She had also studied Gaetz's voting record and public statements on education, compiling evidence that contrasted his rhetoric with his actual performance. Representative Crockett doesn't just prepare remarks, one staffer later explained. She prepares for every possible interruption, like a chess player planning several moves ahead. Unbeknownst to Gaetz, his interruption was not a disruption. It was a trap Crockett had anticipated. As she stood at the podium, Crockett adjusted her glasses and looked directly at him. "I thank the gentleman from Florida for his question," she began, her voice steady but firm. "To answer directly, yes, I have read this bill in full, all 341 pages of it. The education cuts begin on page 73, section 1042, and continue through page 189. They include a 22% reduction to Title I funding for low-income schools, the elimination of the Striving Readers Literacy Program, and a 17% cut to special education grants." She lifted a document from the podium. "I have here a district-by-district analysis showing how these cuts affect every congressional district, including yours, Congressman. In Escambia County, Florida, schools would lose approximately $8.2 million, impacting more than 15,000 students." The chamber remained silent as Crockett laid out the details point by point, dismantling Gaetz's challenge with precision. Then she continued. "Since the gentleman questioned whether I've read the bill, perhaps we should now review his own involvement with this legislation." According to official committee attendance records, Representative Gaetz missed 7 of the 9 Education and Workforce Committee meetings where this bill was discussed and amended. As murmurs spread across the chamber, Crockett continued, citing further data. "The Congressional Research Service confirms that the gentleman from Florida has missed 61% of Education Committee sessions. Since taking office, among the highest absentee rates in Congress." Gaetz's smirk faded, replaced by unease as he realized Crockett had come fully prepared, not only to defend her stance, but to challenge his record with verifiable facts. "Furthermore," Crockett went on, her tone firming, "while questioning my preparation, the gentleman might consider his own legislative history on education. In 7 years in Congress, he has not authored a single education bill that received a committee vote, let alone passed into law." The chamber reacted with a mix of gasps and murmurs. Gaetz tried to interject, but Crockett held the floor. "Mr. Speaker, I did not interrupt the gentleman, and I would appreciate the same courtesy." The Speaker pro tempore nodded, and Gaetz reluctantly withdrew. "What's especially concerning," Crockett continued, "is that while the gentleman questions my understanding of this bill, public records show he was attending a fundraising event at Mar-a-Lago during the bill's markup session. In fact, FEC filings reveal he has hosted 17 fundraisers during scheduled Education Committee meetings." She paused to let the point sink in. "So when the gentleman asks if I've read the bill, the answer is yes. The more relevant question is, has he?" The atmosphere in the chamber had shifted entirely. Republican members who usually supported Gaetz's confrontational style now sat uncomfortably as his record was laid bare. Several reviewed the district impact analysis Crockett had mentioned, realizing the proposed education cuts could harm their own constituents. Sensing he had misjudged the exchange, Gaetz attempted to recover. "Will the gentlewoman yield for a response?" "I yield for a question, as required under House rules," Crockett replied, emphasizing the distinction. "The gentlewoman is misrepresenting my record," Gaetz began, his earlier confidence replaced by irritation. "I've long supported education reform." "Point of order, Mr. Speaker," Crockett interjected. The gentleman indicated he had a question. "This appears to be a speech." "The gentlewoman is correct," ruled the Speaker pro tempore. "Does the gentleman from Florida have a specific question?" Momentarily unsettled, Gaetz tried again. "My question is whether the gentlewoman acknowledges that this bill grants local school districts greater flexibility in allocating resources instead of following federal mandates." It was a familiar talking point, but Crockett was ready. "I appreciate that question," she responded, "because it allows me to address the so-called flexibility claim directly. This bill doesn't merely increase flexibility, it shifts financial responsibility onto local districts while cutting overall funding." Holding up a document, she continued, "Here is the impact analysis for Escambia and Santa Rosa counties in the gentleman's own district." Under this proposal, maintaining current education services would require a local property tax increase of approximately 17% to offset the federal reduction. Is that the flexibility the gentleman refers to? The choice between cutting essential services or raising taxes on his constituents? Her precise rebuttal left little room for evasion. By focusing on Gaetz's own district, Crockett transformed a policy argument into a direct question of representation. Gaetz, now visibly uncomfortable, remained silent as she continued dissecting the bill's impact. Crockett methodically detailed how the legislation would affect rural schools, special education programs, and teacher development initiatives, citing the bill's language and supporting data. As she concluded, she stated, "Mr. Speaker, I came to Congress to solve real problems facing American families, not to perform for cameras or social media. When members interrupt colleagues without reading the legislation or attending committee sessions, they disrespect not only this institution but their constituents." Gathering her papers, she finished, "I welcome a substantive debate on education policy with any member who has actually reviewed this bill and its effects. But I cannot productively engage with interruptions from those prioritizing viral moments over genuine governance." As her time expired, there was no typical partisan applause or rebuttal, just silence. Members from both parties reflected on what they had witnessed. Not a mere disagreement, but a call for seriousness in congressional discourse. For Gaetz, the exchange was unprecedented. His trademark confrontational tactics had failed, exposing weaknesses in his record that would be difficult to explain away. The aftermath was immediate. As the House recessed for lunch, members clustered in small groups reviewing the data Crockett had cited. In the hallway, reporters surrounded her, but she offered only one statement. "I believe congressional debates should focus on substance, not performance. The American people deserve representatives who do the real work." Gaetz, notably, was absent. His staff told waiting journalists he had pressing meetings and would not comment, a rare silence from a representative known for embracing media attention after heated exchanges. The true turning point came unexpectedly. When the session reconvened, a senior Republican on the Education and Workforce Committee requested recognition. "Mr. Speaker," the legislator said, "given the district impact data presented this morning, I believe our committee should reconvene to reconsider certain provisions of H.R. 4762 before a floor vote. This request, from a member of the majority party sponsoring the bill, was a remarkable validation of Crockett's critique. Several Republicans, especially those representing rural districts, echoed the sentiment. "I've reviewed Representative Crockett's analysis," said another Republican, "and the projected effects on schools in my district are troubling. I cannot, in good conscience, support the bill as written." The wave of reconsideration was unprecedented for legislation once expected to pass along party lines. Recognizing they no longer had the votes, the bill's sponsors agreed to send it back to committee for revision. For Gaetz, the fallout extended far beyond a single debate. Video clips of Representative Crockett methodically exposing Gaetz's poor attendance and lack of legislative achievement spread quickly across social media and major news outlets. Local newspapers in his Florida district ran front-page stories questioning his performance as their representative. Gaetz's congressional record under scrutiny read the headline in Pensacola's leading newspaper, which featured a detailed analysis comparing his committee attendance and accomplishments with other Florida lawmakers. The most damaging revelation was that he frequently missed education committee meetings to attend, fundraisers, information that deeply concerned constituents, focused on school funding. Within days, his office was overwhelmed with calls and emails demanding answers. At first, Gaetz tried to brush off Crockett's criticisms as partisan attacks. But that strategy failed once the documented facts came to light. Even his usual media allies struggled to defend him against the concrete evidence of poor attendance and weak voting participation. The turning point came a week later when the district's largest teachers' association announced plans to meet with potential challengers for the next election, a major shift from their prior neutrality in Republican primaries. Realizing the threat to his re-election, Gaetz organized an emergency town hall. But instead of his trademark confidence, attendees saw a very different version of him, one who came prepared with policy proposals and spent most of the event listening to constituents rather than delivering provocative remarks. It was like he suddenly realized he actually had to do the job, not just talk about it, noted a local government teacher who attended the event. The impact of the exchange extended beyond Gaetz himself. Other members known for chasing media attention began approaching committee work and debates more seriously, aware that the Crockett-Gaetz clash had revealed new vulnerabilities for legislators who ignored substantive work. Committee chairs reported improved attendance, especially from members who had often been absent. Several lawmakers once known for dramatic interruptions on the House floor became more restrained, offering specific policy critiques instead of general attacks. Most notably, the House Education and Workforce Committee reconvened to amend H.R. 4762, adding protections Crockett had championed. The revised bill passed with funding safeguards for Title I schools and special education programs, provisions missing from the original draft. For Crockett, the aftermath brought increased respect within Congress. Members from both parties began seeking her insight on education policy, recognizing her command of the subject. Her careful, evidence-based style became a model for new representatives hoping to build credibility beyond partisan performance. 6 months later, the long-term effects became clear when new committee assignments were released. Once considered a rising star, Gaetz was removed from the Education and Workforce Committee, a clear demotion reflecting his damaged standing. His replacement, a freshman Republican and former school administrator, campaigned on prioritizing substantive education policy over political theater. The message from party leadership was unmistakable. Media theatrics might attract attention, but real influence and re-election depended on genuine work and constituent service. The confrontation between Crockett and Gaetz evolved from a viral moment into a case study in political accountability, resonating far beyond Washington. 18 months after their floor exchange, its ripple effects continued shaping congressional behavior and political discourse. For Gaetz, the fallout was severe. Crockett's challenge triggered deeper investigations into his record. Journalists uncovered a 7-year pattern of missed meetings, abandoned initiatives, and prioritizing media exposure over legislative duties. For the first time, he faced a serious primary challenger, a retired Navy officer and former school board member who campaigned on a simple message: representation, not performance. Our district deserves someone who shows up to work, the challenger said. Committee meetings aren't optional. Voting isn't optional. The real work of legislation isn't optional. Local media that once amplified Gaetz's soundbites now contrasted his national appearances with his attendance record. The Pensacola News-Journal even launched a weekly accountability report tracking all Florida representatives' committee attendance, votes, and legislative progress. When the primary votes were counted, the result shocked observers nationwide. Gaetz, who had previously won by over 30 points, lost by just 3.2%, a stunning upset in a district where incumbents rarely lose. In his concession speech, a humbled Gaetz reflected, "I came to Washington to disrupt the system, but somewhere along the way, I confused disruption with distraction. My constituents have made their expectations clear." For Crockett, the outcome marked a different kind of success. Instead of using her growing profile for viral moments, she focused even more on policy work. Her office became known for in-depth policy analyses that lawmakers from both parties consulted before major votes. What Representative Crockett achieved wasn't just a tactical win in a debate, explained a congressional studies professor. She created a new model for effectiveness, one grounded in expertise, not performance. Her approach strongly influenced the next class of representatives, many of whom cited her example and promised to prioritize committee work and legislative results over media visibility. This emerging Crockett effect soon became measurable. Committee attendance rose across Congress. Floor speeches grew shorter but more substantive, filled with policy details and bill references. Lawmakers arrived better prepared for hearings, asking informed, issue-specific questions. In the end, a single confrontation reshaped expectations within Congress, showing that while political theater might trend online, real credibility still comes from doing the work. Arriving with specific data and well-documented references instead of vague talking points, marked a shift toward more substantial congressional debate. According to a longtime House parliamentarian, lawmakers are increasingly aware that in today's world of searchable records and instant fact-checking, performance without preparation exposes weaknesses. Beyond Capitol Hill, this exchange encouraged a broader reflection on democratic accountability in an era often dominated by performance-driven politics. Civic education programs even integrated footage of the Crockett-Gaetz confrontation into their media literacy lessons, using it to show the difference between persuasive speaking and genuine governance. Students must learn the difference between a representative who sounds impressive and one who actually delivers results, explained a high school government teacher. The Crockett-Gaetz exchange serves as an ideal example of why this distinction matters for meaningful democratic participation among citizens. The confrontation revealed several key lessons about effective representation in democratic systems. First, it demonstrated that solid knowledge and thorough preparation still hold power in political discussions, even in an age ruled by short sound bites. Crockett proved that a clear command of facts and policy can outmatch even the most polished rhetoric. Second, the event showed how digital transparency and accessible information have transformed political accountability. Gaetz's committee absences and voting record, once hidden details known only to insiders, became publicly available and easily verifiable by voters. Third, it highlighted that despite deep political divides, citizens across the spectrum share common expectations about their representatives' performance. The primary loss of a strongly conservative lawmaker in a solid Republican district suggested that dedication to legislative work and constituent service can rise above ideological boundaries. Finally, the incident emphasized that in democratic systems, renewal often occurs not through dramatic revolutions, but through individual actions that gradually reshape institutional norms. One representative's commitment to substance over spectacle initiated a broader cultural shift within Congress. As a civic engagement advocate noted, this was a powerful reminder that democratic accountability depends on citizens who judge representatives by their work, not their media image. Representative Crockett proved that when showmanship meets substance, genuine governance can still prevail. 2 years later, during debate over another education funding bill, the impact of that moment became evident once more. In committee discussions, a freshman representative challenged a senior member's amendment, using specific statutory details and district data mirroring the exact approach Crockett had taken against Gaetz. When a reporter asked what inspired her tactics, she replied, "I watched that Crockett-Gaetz exchange during my campaign and promised myself I'd be a Crockett, not a Gaetz." Citizens deserve representatives who actually do the work. For students of government, the Crockett-Gaetz confrontation became a case study in how democratic institutions can correct themselves when hollow performance is exposed to factual scrutiny. As polarization continues to turn politics into a team rivalry, Crockett's methodical use of evidence proved that facts can still cut through partisan noise and restore accountability built on shared public service standards, as one civics teacher told her students while showing the exchange. "This is what democracy should look like. We can disagree passionately about issues, but our debates must be grounded in facts and genuine engagement with governance. When representatives focus on performance instead of substance, they fail their constituents and weaken the foundation of representative democracy." If you found this discussion on congressional accountability insightful, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more content exploring how democratic institutions truly function. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss new videos examining the balance between political rhetoric and genuine governance, the core of a healthy democracy.